When it comes to portable retro gaming, few devices can hold a candle to the PlayStation Portable, the PSP. This thing is powerful enough to run pretty much anything below the N64. It was ubiquitous enough that it's pretty easy to find secondhand. And maybe I'm biased, but I find this thing gorgeous. I get hit up a lot by people who are thinking of getting into portable retro gaming, and often they have a lot of questions about the PSP. And one of those questions is, should I get a regular PSP or a PSPgo? I get that question so often that I figured it'd be easier to have a video to just give to these people when they ask me which PSP model they should go for. So if you're thinking about pulling the trigger on a PSP but you're kind of unsure of which model to get, this is the video you want to watch. The first difference between the two devices is obviously the form factor. The PSP, and I almost said the original PSP, this isn't an original PSP, this is a PSP 2000, its first hardware revision. But it's effectively the same thing as the old one. This thing right here is noticeably bigger and heavier than the PSPgo, which is, it kind of closes like this. And it's very, very small, very light, very thin as well. So if you're going for portability, this guy right here is the one to go for. That is the main advantage it has over the older models. Though this channel is primarily about retro gaming, I have to mention native PSP games as well, because that factors into how these devices stack up against one another. So with the PSP, you have an optical media drive here. The games and movies came out on this format called UMD, or Universal Media Disc. It's funny that they should call them universal, because this was the only device that ran that format. That means that you can buy your games at a pawn shop or a retro gaming convention or anything like that. Toss those suckers right in there and you can play your games. No strings attached. It's not quite as easy on the PSPgo because, as you probably know, it lacks that optical drive. So all of the games would have to be downloaded. Now, in its heyday, this was very easy because you could just log into the PlayStation Store on the PSP itself and buy your games there. The PSP Store, however, was shut down in March 2016, but that doesn't mean you can't get your games on it anymore. You just can't buy them on the PSP. What you can do is go on the store website or on a PS3, buy them there, and then transfer them to your PSP, or log into the PSN on your PSP and go to the downloads list, which will list all the games you have bought under that PSN account. That way you can still download your PSP games, you just won't be able to buy them on the device itself. And needless to say, nobody knows how long that will still work for. So potentially, if you're not looking into, say, modding the device, if you want to just play legit games, the PSPgo is not future-proof. For that reason, a lot of people decide to pass on it. And this was a concern when this model was introduced because, as we all know, digital gaming isn't necessarily forever. Once those servers are gone, there's no guarantees you'll ever be able to play those games ever again. So that's a big con on the PSPgo. Obviously, if you're looking to mod this thing, that's not going to be a concern for you, but something to keep in mind. So going back to the PSPgo, obviously it's much more portable, and it lacks that UMD drive, which is both a blessing and a curse. You see, the UMD drive is a moving part. It has a little motor that spins a disc in there. That means it uses a lot more power than something that is just flash memory based. So it's a pro and a con rolled into one. Another big difference is that the PSPgo has internal memory, 16 gigs, and you can also expand that memory using M2 memory sticks. This thing, on the other hand, had no built-in memory. You had to put in memory sticks. There's one right there. This one is an 8 gig. Back then, 8 gig was a lot. The PSPgo also has Bluetooth, and not only that, but it also had a dock, which now it's pretty hard to find. I see it on eBay for $200 to $300. So you could pair a DualShock controller to this thing, dock it, and then play PSP games on your TV. When you're done, take this thing right out of its dock, put it in your pocket, and just go about your day. So yes, in a way, Sony actually came out with the concept for the Switch before for Nintendo. That's a big plus, or it would be if that dock was easier to find, because that's something I want as a collector, and it's hard to justify $200 for that because I'm mostly about portability. Plus, they never made that dock in white, so that would bug me a little bit, the white PSPgo with the black dock. I do have a black PSPgo, but I like the white one better. One con with the PSPgo that I heard all the time, but I haven't encountered that issue with both of my PSPgos, knock on wood, is the fact that this assembly here, the screen is connected to the bottom part, the controller part, through a ribbon cable, which is prone to failing. Again, this is a problem that's very common to cell phones that used a mechanism like this, and I always heard that the PSPgo is prone to this issue. Never happened. And again, I have two of them, so this one is a little dirty. As you can see, I haven't played with this one in a little while. This is my go-to. Another con with the PSPgo, and it's weird because I love my PSPgo, but looking at it objectively, there are a lot of issues with this design, and the battery is one of them. I flipped this thing over like you can see the battery. You can't see it. There's a battery in there, obviously. This is not user replaceable as opposed to the original design where you could just pop this thing right there. There's a battery. By the way, this is the Stamina Pack, which is a bigger battery, and it's made by Sony themselves, but it was discontinued shortly after. And as you can see, it adds quite a bit of bulk here to the side. It came with this little back cover here to make it fit, and as you can see, it's not flush. Oh, I think I put it in wrong. Here we go. There we go. This bugged me a lot more when I first got it, but now I don't even notice it anymore. So if the battery goes bad on this thing, you can just pop it right out and put a new one in. This, though it can actually be done, it's a much more complicated procedure. Still on the battery on the PSPgo is kind of wonky in that it is unable to tell you how much battery exactly you have left. And this is interesting because if I go here into the settings on my older PSP and I go into, where is it here, battery information, it'll show you how much battery I have left because it's able to tell you what's the percentage and how many hours you have left. On the PSPgo, on the other hand, it doesn't have that option. And the reason for that is that the system is unable to tell you exactly how long the battery will last. Even these three little, let me open it again. Even these three little notches here, it's wildly inaccurate. And that's even more noticeable when you go into homebrew applications that were supposed to tell you what's the percentage and how much time you have left in your battery. Like this Game Boy emulator. As you can see, let me see if I can get it to focus there. It says 90% battery and then a crazy time. And it only ever says either 90, 60, or 30% battery. Nothing in between. This thing actually has 100% battery because I just charged it, but it'll always, at the most, say 90%. Same thing is happening in this Game Boy Advance emulator. It's saying 90% battery life and only 90 minutes, which obviously isn't right. And again, we see the same issue here on this Super Nintendo emulator. Now, I'm shooting this seconds after the last bit, and it's already showing 60% battery and a crazy amount of minutes right there, see? The temperature is also way out of whack. So the battery on the PSPgo is kind of weird. Ultimately, I have to say that the PSPgo, though I love the design so much, I have two of them, it doesn't offer the best bang for your buck, especially when you consider that it was a little bit more expensive, even more so now because it's a little bit harder to come by, especially if you fancy the white model. The regular PSP, though a little bit hefty, has basically the same stuff for much cheaper, and you won't have the same battery or media issues. Also, it charges with a regular mini USB cord, which, though not as common as, say, micro USB or USB Type-C, is still better than this proprietary connector. If you lose your charging cable, you're screwed. You're gonna have to buy a new one. As you can see here, there's a setting for USB charge. I have it on, so if I go into my USB connection here and I actually connect that to my computer, see, I connected it, and then as you'll see, the power LED turned orange to indicate that it's being charged, and this thing will start flashing in a second. This does not work on the PSP 1000, and there you go, it's blinking there to indicate that it's being charged. That's a big advantage over the PSPgo, because if you lose your charging cable for your PSPgo, you are pretty much screwed. And in fact, I left mine at Natalia's house, and it's lucky that I have two, so I had a spare here at the apartment, but otherwise I'd be without a charger for a week. So yeah, that's yet another disadvantage of the PSPgo model. As you can see, there are a lot of pros to the regular PSP design. So to sum up, with the regular PSP model, you have better ergonomics. I mean, definitely better than something this small. I've always heard a lot of complaints about this device because it's just so small. A lot of people buy grips for it. You got a replaceable battery. You have a regular USB connection that doesn't rely on a proprietary one. A larger screen if that's what you're into. The analog stick is a little bit bigger and easier to use. This thing is pretty small. And it's more affordable, so it's a lot of pros. And yet, I don't use my regular PSP that much anymore because I've always been about portability. And the fact that I can fit this thing into a breast pocket makes all the difference in the world for me. I love having both and being able to go back and forth, but this is the one for me. What about you? Which PSP model do you prefer? And I have a pretty good feeling that most of you are going to favor the regular PSP just because there's just a lot of pros to it. I mean, just the fact that it's more affordable makes it the #1 choice for most people. I mean, most people wouldn't want to spend extra just for a little added portability. But as always, I'm curious about what you think. Let me know in the comments down below. Tell me where you're watching these videos from. I'm always fascinated to find out where you guys are watching these from. Follow me on social media. I'm always very active there. That was my camera. It just died. I'm always very active on both Twitter and Instagram. Make sure to follow me there. And that's all the time I have for today. I'm Izzy, and I'm done.